We've hit our stride, 2 winning weeks back to back. Let's make it 3 on Beat the Book. Welcome to Beat the Book, brought to you by the Turf Club at Northern Quest Resort and Casino. I am your host, Keith Osso, and yes, after such misery the first 3 weeks of this podcast and our segments on 4 News Now, we finally started to figure things out. Back-to-back winning weeks, including a 3-1 week a week ago between my 3 picks and Alex's 1 pick. Again, the only team we can't seem to figure out is the home team, the Seattle Seahawks. We'll have our picks for the week coming up a little bit later, but first we want to bring back a Spokane guy, someone you may recognize, the weekend guy at the sports person at the station across town from here. Went from here to Seattle, ended up in Las Vegas, and now is a sports gambling insider and does it for a living, and he broadcasts for the VSiN network. It's Femi Abebefe. You may remember him. He's going to teach us a lot about what goes into sports gambling. First of all, it's good to have you back in Spokane, at least digitally. A little warmer where you are today. Welcome back, I suppose.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, man. It's been a while since we've chatted, so always good to hear from you. And Spokane holds a special place in my heart. But don't miss the weather you guys have going on right now here in early January.
Yeah, I don't think anybody likes it here right now that way. Now that we're allowed to talk about sports gambling, it was kind of, as Will Sherritt said last week, it was kind of in the shadows. We had to talk about it behind closed doors. What's your history in being around, handicapping and looking at games and making bets and things like that? How did you get involved in it and interested in this?
It kind of started probably during PASPA when they lifted the federal ban of sports betting, or not really a federal ban, but they made it to where states outside of Nevada could also be able to legalize sports betting if they wanted to so choose. So that's when I really started to dive in. I mean, the first time I ever made bets goes way back further than that. I mean, I remember betting NBA playoff series in middle school with friends, just little $5 handshake bets and all that stuff. And then I took a little break during high school and college. Then it was a trip to Reno, Nevada with a buddy of mine that we worked together in Bend, Oregon at the TV station down there. And we spent the first weekend of March Madness in Reno, and we were just firing off all sorts of just crazy parlays, trying to turn $20 into $8,000 or what have you and stuff. And I was like, at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm never betting on the college kids again. And then that rule lasted about 2 years. And we quickly amended that in 2018. But I'd say that's kind of when I started to look at these things, and it's just a different way to kind of watch and enjoy sports, right. Kind of similar to the boom of fantasy sports and fantasy football, fantasy basketball, all those types of things. It doesn't have the same camaraderie as fantasy sports do, like when you're in a league with your friends and all that stuff. This is more so an individual thing, but it definitely is kind of makes every game feel like it's the Super Bowl, or feel like it's Game 7 or like the final round of a big golf tournament. So it's kind of a fun way to do it. And obviously, if you don't want to go too crazy with it, I'm sure we'll get into that in this interview, but just kind of a different way to look at sports, and that's kind of what it gravitated toward me with, at least.
People in Spokane will remember you from another channel here in town, and you went from here to Seattle, your hometown pretty much, and
Yep.
You got to be there, and then COVID hit, and sports all over the country kind of went away. And then you got this opportunity at VSiN. So you get an opportunity to professionally talk about sports gambling for a living. You're in Vegas. You're in a sports book every day. How did that opportunity come about, and how excited were you to have this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to tell the condensed version of the story because it can get pretty lengthy here. But I would say probably around 2019 was when I really decided to, just kind of as a hobby, just wanted to handicap sports, just because I love the NFL. I've been watching it since I was 6 years old. And it just was the sport that I was like, okay, that's something that it would be difficult. I heard a lot of people talk about how betting NFL is very difficult. So I was like, hey, that's a cool challenge that I could do during my spare time. And I would do it and bet here a little here and there and all that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is really hard. And then 2020 really took it to the next level. And I think more so just because of the pandemic, when that hit in March of 2020, we weren't going anywhere. So I was like, okay, I'm not going on vacation. What's going on? All this stuff. I was like, all right, well, how can I pass time? I was like, well, maybe this is kind of a way to go about that, is kind of take this to the next level. And one thing that I did when I was at my station in Seattle was I wrote a weekly gambling sports betting column just on NFL picks. I would just kind of call it Femi's favorites. And it was just 5 picks points against the spread in the NFL, whether it be a side or a total or what have you. And that was kind of like a way to just kind of start doing this, because I saw kind of the writing on the wall of where this was headed. I was like, hey, like, yeah, like the national media is already doing this from a big standpoint. I was like, local, it's not really as big, but it could get there. So let me be the person that kind of gets out in front of that in Seattle. Right. Like I really wanted to, like, how do I differentiate myself from everybody else in the market? Well, let me try to specialize in this, because nobody else is really talking about it on a grand scale. So I did that and got kind of different reps with doing it. And I was like, hey, this is actually something that was some original piece of web content on our website, which was kind of nice. And I'm sure our web people like that as well. And then fast forward to kind of March of 2021, and I get laid off, and I was like, okay, this is a bummer. But I was like, hey, like, I think I kind of want to do this sports betting kind of content, because I saw, I mean, at that point, I mean, earlier this year, it's huge. It's everywhere. Right. Fox, ESPN, all these networks, NFL Network. I mean, think about the NFL. They partnered with DraftKings, and they have lines, they have totals on the games on the little crawl there. Like, you never thought you'd see that 5 years ago. And that's kind of where we're at now in this current landscape. And I was like, I need to make sure I kind of immerse myself in it just to know it, because I think it'd just be valuable to know and differentiate myself from other people in broadcast journalism. And also, it was a hobby of mine that really, I was like, hey, I really like doing this, and I'd like to kind of make it a career and make that leap from local news to doing this at a network. And luckily, the folks at VSiN, they saw me. I mean, people say that social media is awful, but it helped me get me this job. Wow. I mean, to be honest, like, just from tweeting about it, I was laid off, unemployed, March, which is, for the folks out there who've never been laid off, March is a pretty ideal time to do it, with a lot of college basketball on TV. There could have been worse times to get laid off. So I was watching a ton of college basketball. The NCAA tournament came right as like this distraction for me, so I didn't kind of get bummed out about that and all that stuff. So I would tweet about just kind of betting and all that. And the program director here at VSiN was like, hey, like, I see you tweet a lot about sports betting. Is that something that kind of interests you? And then it kind of took off from there, and then, you know, just went down and did an audition in May, and they liked me, and I knocked it out the park, and here I am now. I've been here since late July here in Vegas.
The stuff you guys post, you have access to infinite statistics and knowledge. What do you look for when you're starting a week? So I every week I see you, like, before the Monday night game, you've already started handicapping the next week's games. Mm-hmm. What is it you're looking for in the NFL specifically when you go into a week? Is there a statistic you're looking for? Is it a gut feel? What is it that you start your week with?
Well, it's definitely statistics. And one of the things with NFL handicapping that I think a lot of people may not know, or depending on how much time you have, just like, because everybody has jobs and all that stuff, so you might not be able to do this. But one thing that I do, I mean, it goes all the way back from springtime. I'm tracking the free agency moves, all the acquisitions, the draft, and all that stuff, just to kind of essentially power rate the teams 1 through 32 in the off season. And then you kind of go from there. And when the schedule comes out, in May, typically when it comes out, I go out and I literally handicap every single game on the schedule. Wow. And it takes quite a bit of time. It does. But like, one of the tricks that you can use is that, okay, like through your power ratings, you can say, okay, this team is 6 points better than the average team. This other team is, you know, pretty much an average team. Okay, so what's the difference? It's 6 points. Then you factor in home field advantage, rest, all sorts of things that might enter into your handicap. And through there is how you can kind of create just like a baseline spread yourself, and then kind of look for if it matches up with the rest of the betting market, and maybe you think you might see a little bit of value. So if, like, per se, like, let's say I make a line, team A is favored by 3.5 points over team B, but the line in town is, hey, team A is 2.5 points favored over team B. And if I think that my line is good, I'll bet that line -2.5, because I'm like, hey, I think this should be more than a field goal, but now I'm being able to bet under a field goal, nice. 3 being the most key number in football. So that's kind of like, that's where it starts. And then once you get into the season, it's factoring in injuries. COVID is another thing since 2020 that we have to keep tracks on. I jokingly saw somebody on Twitter saying that Twitter has turned into a COVID notification app. And that's pretty much how it is with sports. I'm sure you're covering Gonzaga basketball and all that stuff right now for you guys. You're seeing that, hey, are we gonna have a game tomorrow? You know, it's like, that's just kind of, for sports bettors, it's keeping track of which team have the COVID outbreaks, which teams don't, so that you can make sure that you understand why a line sits where it sits, because you're like, hey, why is this team now like an underdog when they're way better? It's like, well, because their quarterback and 4 offensive linemen are on the COVID list. So that's why that happens to be the case. So I would say my process on a week-to-week basis, because I've already handicapped each game prior to the season, and then throughout the rest of the season, you make your adjustments. Some teams surprise, some teams disappoint, etc. I already have a line set for the games heading into that next week. So Sunday night, when the lines come out for the following week, I'm like, okay, I've factored all this stuff in. And actually during the afternoon slate in the NFL, I spent a good chunk of my time actually making sure I'm staying up on all the injury stuff. There's some good Twitter accounts that are out there that track NFL injury news for fantasy people or just for bettors. And I'll go down there the whole timeline through whole Sunday, because they'll tweet out anybody notable that gets hurt. And I'm like, okay, let me factor that in. Oh, this offensive tackle twisted up his ankle. All right, let me put that into my line just in case, so that I'm aware of that before making a bet, because you can get burned on it if you don't track the injury news. And it's quite a bit of stuff to handle, but once you do that stuff, it helps prevent you from overreacting, which is, I think, the biggest deal in especially football in terms of betting, whether it be college or NFL, because we only get one game per week. So there's so much time to then think and analyze and overanalyze the game that we just saw. And we weight so heavily on that previous result to where it's like, oh, wow, like that should never have been the case. And sometimes you see the betting public or you see the market overreact to a certain result. And then it's like, all right, the other side is probably the right side, or at least that's the valuable side in terms of a bet. Just for example, I mean, the Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys this past week, you know, it's like we saw Dallas just obliterate Washington on Sunday Night Football, put up 56 points, and then Arizona had just lost their 3rd straight game against the Colts on Christmas night. So it's like, okay, the Cowboys are probably going to beat the Cardinals or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And a line that in advance on the 10-day number, the look-ahead number, which we can get into a little bit later, it was Cowboys -2.5. But after we saw those results, it's now Cowboys -6.5. And it's like, and it's like there's no way in a week, barring injury, of course, that there's now a 4-point swing in favor of Dallas. So the valuable bet would have been to Arizona, and they end up winning the game outright. So that's kind of like how you can just preventing yourself from overreacting, because it's hard to do. We're all human, and we usually kind of react and weigh heavily what we just last saw.
How have you changed your betting as far as, are you normally do it early in the week? I know you can get some good lines early because the big money comes in late a lot of times. Have you had to change that because you put money down and then half the team is out with COVID? I mean, how have you changed?
And that's been the fascinating question, I think, since 2020, since the start of last season, was that like, do you want to wait because of the COVID news? And I found myself thinking that, like, you know what? Oftentimes over the long haul, it's going to go 50-50 either way. There's been times where I've made bets and then the COVID news comes out and it works in my favor. I'm like, whoa, I bet a team -3 and now they're -11 or something like that because of COVID news. Or I bet a team +3.5 and now it's like pick 'em. You know, it's like, so it's like, it's or whatever, or vice, or not pick 'em. Sorry, it's like +6.5 now, or something like that. So there's times where it works in your favor and it doesn't work in your favor. For me, because I'm not betting 5, 6, 7 figures on bets, which is typically the people who bet later in the week when the limits are a little higher. Because one of the things that I think first-time bettors, it's so crucial to know is that when the lines first come out, that's not what usually mirrors what you see Friday, Saturday before the game, or Sunday morning before kickoff. The line has usually been just massaged and bet different ways and all that stuff. So maybe the opener, like for the Dallas Cowboys game against the Cardinals, was it opened Cowboys -3.5. And then, but by close, it's Cowboys -6.5. So it's like, if you wanted to bet on the Dallas Cowboys, you clearly should have bet that the opening number earlier in the week, betting that Cowboys -3.5 versus now laying 6.5, because that's just not a valuable bet to place. So what you do see early in the week, though, is that the limits are lower because it's set by the bookmakers, and the bookmakers aren't like, the phrase you'll hear is that Vegas knows, Vegas doesn't know. Like, just to be quite honest, like, it's I talk to bookmakers, I love them, they're really smart and everything like that, but they're just like you and I. They have their opinions on the games and then they hang a line, but the limits are lower, so they might take $1,000 bets or $2,000 bets at most early in the week because they still don't have the information. They're still looking for don't want to be exposed to, okay, if we put this out there and all of a sudden COVID news comes out, now we're in a bad spot. People can get us both ways. They still want to learn all that stuff. So progressively throughout the week, the limits get higher and higher. And then by Friday, when the final injury report's out there, the limits are really high. And Saturday, they're extremely high. And Sunday is when you start to see so-and-so better placed a $1 million bet on this team because the line is really efficient right before kickoff. And everybody, yeah. Everybody who's had an opinion on the game has had a chance to weigh that opinion in and bet the game. Versus early in the week where it's like, okay, I'm just betting against the bookmaker. I'm not betting against the entire betting market. I'm betting against the bookmaker who I think that I might be able to get them on certain things here and there. And if you're starting out betting, you're betting $10, $20 per game. Sure. I think it's incredibly valuable to bet earlier in the week just because the low limits don't affect you. It's like, you're not putting down 5-6 figures. So definitely take advantage of where you can get some good early numbers and get a little bit of value at the closing line, which is ultimately what it takes to beat the NFL.
The last week of the season, so week 18 for the first time ever, you're going to have teams resting guys. You're going to have teams, not caring. I mean, is outside of maybe week 1, is this the toughest week to bet?
I would say kind of in a way, but also it depends on, once again, it depends on how much time you have. Because if let's say you are working a regular job 9 to 5, yes, it will become very difficult because you can't be searching Twitter during your usual job and looking at odds boards and all that stuff unless you have a big lunch break or something like that. But it almost is reminiscent to the preseason. And people will tell you that betting preseason NFL is like the most degenerate thing to do. It's honestly, if you want to win, that's how you should probably start, is betting the preseason, because it's all based on information. Who's going to be playing? How long are they going to be playing? I mean, these press conferences are publicly available on every single team's YouTube page. You could sit there and watch a live stream of, I watched Matt LaFleur say that, I'm going to play Aaron Rodgers this week against the Lions because I don't want our guys to rest for 3 weeks. And right after he said that, 10 minutes after, the line goes from the Detroit Lions being favored by 1 because everybody thought the Green Bay Packers would rest everybody to now Green Bay is now favored by 3. If you had just been watching that 15-minute window where you could have ran to your app or wherever to bet on the Packers when he says that Aaron Rodgers is going to play, because the bookmakers anticipated Rodgers being able to sit because Green Bay already has clinched home field advantage. So I would say week 18 definitely is more so information based. I mean, earlier today, I was sitting here on my laptop and I saw that Lamar Jackson didn't practice once again for Baltimore. And I bet Pittsburgh plus 6.5. And now the line is 5, I believe it is. So it's like something like that, to where if you are keeping tabs of things, following beat writers, definitely if you want to bet on sports, get a Twitter account, follow beat writers for whatever sport you want to bet on, because they are so valuable. They're at these practices and they usually tweet out the practice reports before the report actually gets put out. It's like, don't see Lamar Jackson out here today. And then 2 hours later, the Ravens then put out the official practice report where there was that 2-hour window where you could have taken advantage of so-and-so beat writers saying whatever.
Hey, appreciate your time. Good talking to you, bud. And again, that's VSiN is where you can find him. You can go on at Femi Abebefe on Twitter. Follow him there, and you'll see all his videos there. Femi, good to see you again. Congrats on the job down there. Keep doing good work.
Appreciate it. Good to see you as well, Keith.
Thank you to Femi. Learned a lot. I can't wait to have him back on this podcast again. He taught me so much tonight about what he's looking for in wagering, and I just can't wait to pick his brain some more. Just trying to give you different ideas and different methods into what goes into placing bets for different people, just to get the thought process going on what might make it best for you when you make your bets, which of course you can do at Turf Club at Northern Quest Resort and Casino. Our picks for the week, sticking with the Seahawks. We got to do it. We lost with them again last week, picked the Lions to cover 7. Obviously that didn't happen. Seattle going into Arizona, where the Cardinals have a chance to win the NFC West. Now, it's going to take a win from them and a loss from the Rams to the 49ers. The Rams have lost to the 49ers the last 5 times they've played, so it is a very strong possibility that the Niners can do it again, who also is playing for their playoff lives. I think Arizona might spend a little bit of time watching the scoreboard here. I think everybody likes to say nobody's paying attention, but everybody is. And if you start to see that score go the wrong way, you may see an Arizona team start to get flatter because they're in the playoffs. All they can do is win the West or be the wild card, depending on the outcome of the other game paired with a win for them. So I'm going to take Seattle on the road. We saw how good their offense looked when they had no pressure on them a week ago. I expect the same thing. And Russell Wilson has a chance to break a tie with Peyton Manning. If he can get a win in this game with the Seahawks, he would have the most wins for any quarterback in NFL history through their first 10 seasons in the NFL. That's an important record to Russell Wilson. I expect him to play well. Seattle gets 6.5 points on the road. I'll take Seattle to cover. The Kansas City Chiefs are playing for the number 1 seed in the AFC and home field advantage. The bonus here is they play on Saturday, so they don't know how everybody else is going to perform. They need to go out and pick up a win. They're playing at Denver, a team whose offense is in serious trouble right now with quarterback issues all over the place, which in turn makes the entire defense have a hard time. Kansas City, I got them locked in on Tuesday at -10. That line has already moved a couple of points, and I expect it to continue to rise as people are seeing Kansas City is going to play their starters. They're going to win this football game. I will easily lay 10 points on the road against Denver. The last game on the schedule, the Sunday night game this week, it's a winner into the playoffs game between the Chargers and the Raiders. Now, an interesting side note here. If the Colts were to lose to the Jaguars, which is unlikely, but if they do earlier in the day, a tie in this game would get both the Chargers and the Raiders into the playoffs. Chargers coming out today saying they're not in this to tie anybody. They're going to do everything they can to win the game. I don't think it's going to matter. I think the Colts are going to win their game. So both these teams will be playing for their lives. The over-under is 49.5. Well, the Raiders can run the ball with Josh Jacobs. The Chargers have a hard time stopping anybody against the run. And both teams' defenses in the bottom 9 for points given up per game. I expect a lot of points in this game. And two teams playing with desperation near the end. I'm going to go with a thriller here to end the regular season. I'm going to take the over 49.5. As always, thank you for joining us. We're going to have a new guest coming up next week on Beat the Book. We anticipate a lot of fun games this weekend. Of course, we'll be talking NFL playoffs when we return in a week. As always, enjoy the games and happy betting, everybody.